Everyone thinks their brand growth comes from better visuals, a sharper logo, a prettier Instagram feed, a more polished website. And listen, those things can absolutely help, but they're rarely the real reason a brand grows. Because the truth is, your brand will never outgrow the identity you're operating from. If part of you still sees yourself as figuring it out, not quite ready, or not the expert yet, your brand will quietly reinforce that belief. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because branding is psychological. Your audience feels who you believe you are. And today we're going to talk about that. Because if your brand feels stuck, or smaller than you know it could be, there's a very good chance the bottleneck isn't strategy, it's identity. In this episode, we're talking about one of the most overlooked forces behind brand growth, self-concept. Because your brand isn't just a marketing tool, it's a projection of how clearly you see yourself, what you believe you're here to do, and how confidently you claim your role as a leader. And if your internal identity is still playing small, your brand will reflect that. Not loudly, but subtly, in your messaging, your positioning, the way you show up. So today I want to walk you through why this happens, how it shows up in branding and content, and what actually changes when your identity expands. You're listening to the From Scratch podcast, the podcast for bold entrepreneurs who are done with cookie cutter advice, done with burnout, and done with building businesses that don't actually feel good. I'm your host, Kary, a near $1 million course creator, brand strategist, and business coach for women who are ready to do it differently. 7 years ago, I hit a level of success and still ended up crying on the bathroom floor. So trust me when I say, starting from scratch isn't about starting over. It's about taking your power back and rebuilding on your own terms. Every week, you'll get unfiltered stories, bold strategies, and the mindset shifts you need to build with soul, sell with strategy, and grow something that feels like you. So let's get into it. Not that long ago, I took my daughter to a playground. This one big playground near our house. You know the kind, the huge climbing structures, the slides everywhere, kids running around in every direction. And there was this rock climbing wall built into the playground. My oldest daughter stood at the bottom of it for a long time just staring up, not climbing, just looking. And I asked her what was she thinking? And she said something to me that stuck with me. She said, "I don't think I'm the kind of kid who climbs that." Now here's the thing, she hadn't tried, she hadn't fallen, she hadn't struggled. She had already decided who she was before her hands even touched the wall. But eventually another kid ran up next to her and started climbing. And suddenly everything changed. Because the moment she saw someone her size doing it, her brain updated the story. Maybe I am that kind of kid. And within 5 minutes, she was halfway up the wall. Not because the wall changed. What changed was the identity she believed about herself. And the moment that identity shifted, her behavior followed. This is exactly what happens in branding. Your brand doesn't grow because the strategy suddenly becomes perfect. It grows when the identity behind it expands. Because branding is psychological. Your audience doesn't just want to hear what you say, they want to feel who you believe you are. And when someone hasn't fully stepped into their leadership identity yet, their brand starts reflecting that in subtle ways. Not because they're doing something wrong, but because identity quietly shapes everything. Your messaging, your positioning, your presence, your willingness to lead. And once you start noticing these patterns, you see them everywhere. So let's walk through 5 identity mistakes that keep brands smaller than they need to be. Identity mistake number 1, constantly changing your niche. One of the biggest signs someone hasn't fully stepped into their leadership identity is constantly repositioning. Every few months, the niche changes, the audience shifts, the messaging pivots. And on the surface, it looks strategic, but underneath, it's usually uncertainty. Because when you're still figuring out who you are in the market, your brand reflects that instability and your audience feels it. People don't trust brands that are constantly redefining themselves. They trust brands that feel anchored, brands where the leader clearly knows what they stand for and who they help. Your brand reflects your identity. If your identity still feels like, I'm trying to figure this out, your brand will keep experimenting. But the moment your identity shifts to, this is what I'm known for, your brand stabilizes and stability builds trust. So here's your move. Ask yourself this. If you had to commit to one problem you want to be known for solving for the next 3 years, what would it be? Not what feels trendy, not what feels safe. What actually aligns with the work you are here to lead? Clarity compounds, and strong brands are built through commitment, not constant reinvention. Identity mistake number 2, diluting your opinions to please everyone. The second identity mistake is softening your voice. This often shows up as content that sounds helpful but not decisive. You see phrases like this might not work for everyone. Just my thoughts. Take what resonates. Now, there is nothing wrong with humility, but leadership requires clarity. Strong brands take positions. They challenge ideas. They say things that make the right people feel seen and the wrong people scroll past. And that's actually a good thing because brands grow through differentiation, not neutrality. If your identity still sees yourself as someone who needs to be liked by everyone, your messaging will stay cautious and forgettable. But when your identity shifts to I'm here to lead a conversation, your voice becomes clearer, and clear voices attract loyal audiences. So here's your move. Look at your last 10 pieces of content and ask yourself, did I say something memorable or did I say something safe? Your audience doesn't need you to be perfect. They need you to be clear. Identity mistake number 3, writing a bio that explains instead of leads. The third identity mistake shows up in bios and positioning. Many entrepreneurs write bios that explain what they do, but never claim what they lead. Something like this: I help entrepreneurs with marketing. That tells us the category, but it doesn't tell us the authority. When identity expands, bios shift from explanation to leadership. Instead of describing activity, they describe transformation because strong brands are not defined by tasks. They're defined by outcomes. Your bio is often the first moment someone encounters your brand. If your identity still sees yourself as someone offering services, your bio will reflect that. But when your identity shifts to I lead this transformation, your positioning sharpens immediately. So here's your move. Rewrite your bio using this structure. I help blank achieve blank by blank. Focus on transformation, not the task. Your audience cares about the change you create. Identity mistake number 4, hesitating to sell your offer. The fourth identity mistake shows up around selling. A lot of entrepreneurs believe their hesitation around selling is about strategy, but more often it's identity. If a part of you still feels like, I need more proof, I need more experience, I'm not fully qualified yet, then selling feels uncomfortable because your brain is trying to protect you from being seen before you feel ready. But audiences interpret hesitation as uncertainty, and uncertainty slows buying decisions. Confident brands sell naturally because the leader behind them fully believes in the transformation they provide. That belief becomes contagious. So here's your move. Ask yourself this question: do I believe in my offer enough to recommend it without hesitation? If the answer is yes, practice talking about it more often, not louder, just more consistently. Confidence builds through repetition. And identity mistake number 5, waiting for permission to lead. The final identity mistake is waiting for permission, waiting for another credential, another result, another moment of validation that says, now you're ready. But leadership rarely arrives with permission. It arrives with decision. At some point, every strong brand makes a quiet shift from waiting to be recognized to choosing to lead. And when that identity shift happens, everything changes. Messaging becomes sharper, presence becomes steadier, and audiences start trusting faster because leadership feels grounded. So here's your move. Ask yourself 2 questions. What version of me is my brand currently reflecting? And what version of me does my audience actually need? Because the moment you start operating from that identity, your brand changes. Your messaging strengthens. Your presence deepens and your audience begins to see you differently. Your brand expands when your identity does. If your brand hasn't been growing the way you expected, I want you to hear this. It doesn't mean you're not talented. It doesn't mean your offer is invaluable. It usually means your identity hasn't fully caught up with the leader you're becoming, and your brand is simply waiting for you to claim it. Now, if you want help building a brand that people instantly understand, trust, and want to buy from, I invite you to watch my Magnetic Brand Workshop. Inside this workshop, I'll walk you through how to clarify what you're known for, strengthen your messaging, and build a brand that naturally attracts the right audience. Because when your brand finally reflects who you truly are and the transformation you provide, everything starts working together. Your content lands better, your audience understands you faster, and selling becomes a whole hell of a lot easier. You can watch the Magnetic Brand Workshop whenever you want using the link in the show notes. I look forward to seeing your brand grow.